Hello, welcome to Indie Tutorials. My name is Guillermo and I would like to thank the patrons supporting this channel. Hello everyone, today we are going to take a look at the sprint ability and the sprint state. So we are jogging, and if I hold the B button in the game controller, we will start sprinting. If I release it, we are go back to the jog state. Similarly, if I were to use the keyboard and hit the space bar, we are into the sprint ability. Okay, so let's start our turn. Let's begin by creating the sprint action in the action maps. So let's go to data folder, double click the game input map, and here in the action maps move, let's create a brand new action, and let's call this one sprint. Keep clicking here in the sprint name, and here in the action type we are going to select button, and down below in the interactions make sure to select hold. Remember this is the time that we need to wait till this action is registered as such. So for example 0.5 seconds and 0.4 as minimum and the whole time. Okay, if you don't like this time, you need to either override here or change the default values from the input settings itself. Okay, so next let's go to the binding here, and let's map for the gamepad. Let's click on listen, and I will hold the B button, so button east, and I will add this button to the gamepad schema or scheme. Then let's add another binding, and this time I will select the spacebar again, so listen, spacebar, and I will add this binding to the keyboard and mouse. Alright, so let's open up Machinum editor, and from here let's navigate to the base control, input keys, and let's add a brand new input. Let's name this input sprint, and I will change also the GUID here to sprint. Okay, so down below in the key settings we have also the input ID itself, but in this case what we want to do is add the Unity input action. So let's go back to all settings and scroll down, and first of all let's uncheck in fixed update. We want this to be registered on standard update loop, and then in the input ID settings, the input origin we need to change this to the Unity input action. This is coming from the wrapper that we installed, the plugin that we installed earlier. Here in the input action, let's click on this circle button to select the asset. So from here we are going to select our sprint, move sprint, and for the input handling we are going to change it to hold. We are not going to set any time here, because remember this registering the input sprint is coming from the input action itself at 0.5, 0.4 seconds. So if we were to add another time here, then we will need to wait like almost a second for both to register, so we can leave it as it is. So after doing that, click on save to save this input key. And now that we are here, probably it's a good idea just to change this Xbox B input key to something more meaningful. We were using this for the dodge and the roll, so probably it's a good idea to do that. but let's skip that for now. The next step is going to be, of course, we need a control map to add our input key mapped to an ability. So we need to create, first of all, on the first place, the sprint ability. So let's do that now. Click on status. Down below we have the subsection abilities, so we are going to add here the sprint ability. So because this ability, sprint ability, is based on the same input and will affect the same status as the backstep and the roll, we can safely just copy the roll, for example, and edit the text, and let's call this one sprint. Okay, and let's change the GUID for sprint dash ability. And in the, let's go through the settings. So in the content information, this is what we did already about the sprint name. In the ability settings, we have the ability type to passive and usable in both. In the target selection settings, we already have the target type to self, so this ability we apply to ourselves. In the user settings, if we scroll down, this is where we apply this ability to the stamina. In this case, because we copy the roll ability we have, that we are going to subtract 20 points. In this case, we would like to subtract less than that, but because the status values are integer type of data, we cannot subtract less than or have fractions or decimals. So the less we can subtract is 1 point in this case. This will lead us to a little bit of a problem later on, we'll see, but let's add one here. The last section we need to check is the battle animation, where we are using this dodge ability schematic. So we need to create a new one for the sprint ability schematic, or one schematic for the ability sprint ability. Let's save these changes so far. So we have the new sprint ability created, and let's go to the schematics. Let's open up the dodge ability schematic, and what we can do here is first of all save as, so we can rename this one to sprint ability schematic, and let's select the folder where we are storing our schematics, and let's add sprint ability schematic, or whatever name you choose. But in this case, the change variable, we are going to copy this one. So let's copy and paste, copy, link both together. So select the first one, and here in the variable key, remember this is an object variables that we are going to trigger in the player game object. So let's call this one sprint. I will use again uppercase, and we set the bool to value to true, and then the next one, just for security's sake, we are going to keep the dodge, but in this case we are setting it to false. Save the schematic again. Remember, we save as, and now we save with a new name. Now we have our new schematic for the sprint. We can go back to our status, sprint, and let's select this new schematic, sprint ability. Okay, and we can leave everything as it is. Save the settings again. And now that we have our sprint ability, we can go back to the base control maps, our player control maps, and before we had the roll ability, or the input settings for the roll ability, right? The control key 0 and the control key 1 for the back step. So we need to, let's select the first one and copy the first one, and make sure that the first one that we copy, this needs to be the sprint, because again we are going to use the minimum speed for the sprint, so it will check from top to bottom. So this is the maximum speed that we need to first check. So let's change the input key in the control key 0, the first one in the list, to sprint. Use speed, yes, and in this case let's select 2.5, and I'm going to show you why where this speed is coming from. It's not from the input itself, but internally ORK Framework will try to calculate the speed of the character controller movement, and this value is coming from there. Okay, so for the action ability, we can select now the sprint ability, and now we save to save our settings. And we can move on now to the Animancer state. Okay, so let's close up Machinima Editor and let's go to our player prefab. So open the prefab. Down below we had these object variables with the dodge variable we created earlier, so let's add a new one, and let's call this one, of course, sprint uppercase. We are using magic strings again, so let's change our constant script that we created earlier. So here in the core subfolder of the scripts we have this game constant, so we need to add another constant for the sprint, so we can reuse the constant instead of typing the name itself. So let's copy just the last entry and let's change this one to sprint. Object variable key, and of course this is going to be sprint uppercase. Save the script and let's go back to Unity, let it compile. So let's go back to our player, and we were using these object variables in the character movement. We had this can roll, can backstep, we created this dodge, we can delete those if we wanted, and let's add a new public variable for the sprint. I know that we are probably duplicating things because we just could check the values here, but for clarity's sake and see the values in the inspector, we are going to do so to create a new variable here. So let's double click the character movement script, scroll up, and after the dodge bool, let's create a new public sprint, and let's default it to false. Next we can scroll down until our handle movement function, and here we can say that the sprint is going to be equals to our variable handle, and we want to get a boolean variable, and we can use now our game constant and select the sprint object variable key. Now that we are getting whether this sprint variable is true or false, we can add this logic to our locomotion state. So let's go back to Unity, let it compile, of course, And if we click on our states game object, we have this locomotion. I already imported a new animation for the sprint. So if I go to the art folder, characters, I have this sprint clip. This is coming again from the same animation pack from Unreal that I bought and converted to Unity. So from here, let's open up the locomotion state and let's modify the script. So we want to add a new clip transition for the sprint clip. So let's copy these lines and let's change the jog name to sprint. And we want to play this clip in the jog logic. So we want to be already jogging. So the magnitude, we can leave it as it is. And what we are going to do here is add a new logic. So if our character movement, character movement, sprint value is checked, so this will mean it's true, we can then return our sprint clip. Otherwise, else, we return the jog clip. Save the script and let's go back to Unity. Let it compile. And now in the states game object we should have now this new inspector entry to add the sprint clip. So let's do that. And make sure that the start time is unchecked. Okay. So I have autosave for the prefab, so it will autosave these changes. So let's go back to the main scene and let's continue. Okay, so before testing, something I always forget to do is to add the new ability to the combatant. So let's go to Game is Love, Machinum, and we have created a new ability, so we need to let the combatant learn that ability, of course. So let's go to Combatant, Player Combatant, and Attacks and Ability subsection tab, and from here we can add a new ability to learn, which is the sprint ability. In this case I don't want no notifications console, class forget, class change, etc. So we just keep the sprint ability. Click on save, confirm, and let's go back to Unity. So let's click on play to test. I will select the player game object to see in the inspector the states and also the flag for the sprint. Now we are jogging, so if I were to hold the B button on the controller, you can see the flag change to sprint and the stamina is going down. If I release the button, the stamina starts regenerating, but we are still stuck in the sprint animation because the flag was not changed to false. Unfortunately, I was not yet able to find a way to tell the system when the ability ended. That's something I need to probably ask Game is Love, the developer, how to actually propagate where an ability ends. But in this case, what we can do is check whether the input was released in the character movement script. So let's do that as a workaround. So let's stop playing mode and open up the character movement script. Okay, so previously for the horizontal and move key we were storing serialized field with the input key assets, so we can assign those here in the inspector itself. So this could be one way to do it, if you like, having another field for the sprint key, or in this case, if you don't want to have another field to be serialized by Unity, we could just call all these same things by code here, having the ID of the input key again. So let's do that. So let's make room here in the handle movement function, and now we can check if not the gaming is love machinum input key get button. Now we need to pass here input key asset, so we can start typing gaming is love. I'm using the whole namespace for learning purposes. You can add this in the using statement and not do that. So in this case we use the Mackie namespace, input keys, and we need to retrieve an input key asset, and here we need to pass the index of this input key. So if we check the editor again, the Machinum editor, and go to base control, input keys, we have the sprint key is index 7. So this is what we need to provide there, 7. Again, this is a magic index, magic integer that we are using here. I don't like that, so for that reason I'm going to import later on the constant class that we made for line in return. I still think is usable in this case for ORK3 for these scenarios where we don't need to remember exactly the index. Okay, but anyways, let's continue. And of course, so if the get button is false, then we can set the flag sprint to false, right? So for that we can call our variable handle, and we have the set option. In this case I will select the set without notify because I don't care about notification to the console. And here of course we use again our game constants, sprint object variable key, and the value we want to set is false. Okay, so let's see if that works. Let the script compile and hit play. I'm going to select again the player game object as soon as it's spawned to check these inspector fields, and let's start jogging and click the B button. If I release the B button, we go back to jog. Now let's see what happens if we run out of stamina. we keep sprinting, so that's not good. We are bound only when we release the button, so let's tweak that as well. Stop game object and the play mode, sorry, and let's continue. So to fix that, we need to let Animancer know when our stamina ran off. So before doing that in the script, I'm going to import the Machinome ORK constant script. So I will put that in my scripts folder. This needs to be placed in the editor folder. I will post this in the official ORK forum, right in the Keldrin ping post. So this is an update of the script he made. And what we can do after importing this script, we go to the edit. Down below we have generate Machinome constant. So let's click on that one, and we are prompted to select the folder we want to this script to be placed. So let's select scripts. I will put that one in utils and select this folder. So it will generate a new script for us. Let Unity compile, and if we go back now to the utils folder, we see this Machinome constant, and it contains the index of most of the lists that we see in the editor. So it is still, for me, from my point of view, useful. So we don't need to remember right away the index of these items. And of course, whatever change we made in the editor itself, like adding a new input key or a new ability, we need to regenerate this script. Okay. So after that being said, we can go back to our character, and we add this logic here in the character script itself. So this is the hub for all the components, and what I'm going to do is create down below a new function. So public bool is going to return true or false, and let's say has stamina. And what we can do here is just return get return we have a reference to our combatant. What is it? Oh, we don't. So let's add one up here. After the character movement, we can create a serialized field. Well, actually it doesn't matter, because the combatant component is not serializable, or is not serialized. So let's just add a private combatant. Combatant. Let's fix the namespace here, and let's add a public, just in case we wanted to get the current combatant from this character script. So combatant is going to return our private combatant. Then down below, after the wake, we can say in the start method to check and set this combatant game object, or sorry, component. But in this case, instead of querying, for example, the ORK active group and return the leader combatant, because we are going to reuse this script for also AI and NPCs, we could just call the ORK component helper and ask for the combatant component, and we need to pass here the the game object that this script resides to. So after having the combatant itself, we can go here in the stamina and say combatant status combatant dot status, and here is asking me for the index of the status of this combatant, and I made a mistake here in the get statement, so let's start over here. So get, this is the right way, and we need to return whether the combatant status, and now it's asking me for the index, and in this case we can use our constant that we made before, so ORK status value, and the status value we want here is the stamina. We want to get the value, so get value, and check whether it is greater than 0. Okay, so HasStamina will return true if the current stamina is greater than 0. And you can see why it's handy, this script. Okay, so now that we have our check for the stamina, we can go back to the locomotion state, and in the if statement where we are checking the sprint flag, we could say and also character has a stamina. Okay, and probably something that you want also to do for the dodge state, so you can roll only when or backstep when you had enough stamina, but I will leave it for now like so. So let's save the changes and let Unity compile and give it a try. So once again we are jogging, start sprinting, we run out of stamina, and we are go back to the jog animation. We still see that the stamina regen is not starting right away after we run out of stamina, so that's another thing that we need to fix. So let's stop playing and let's continue. So before wrapping up this episode today, I wanted to show you, let me go back to the play mode, about the movement speed that we are using in our conditions for the control map. If we click on the player and scroll down where we have the combatant component, we have here this speed variable. So if we were to start walking, you can see the values, and this is where I took this 2.5 for the sprint to be a trigger. So we're back to jog 3 point something, and that's what I wanted to show you. And regarding the issue with the stamina is that it's like, even though we are reaching 0, you will see there in the stamina in the right side, it starts fighting each other with the regen. You see changing the stamina, and I think that's the root of the issue, but I will try to find a better way for the next time. This video is already too long. So once again, thank you for being there, and I hope you learned something new and supporting the channel. See you on the next time.